Hello, good morning. Hope you're having a great day so far and a great week since this is Tuesday for those of you watching live. Nicole, looks like you can see and hear me. Fantastic. All right. You can always count on Nicole there. Hey, so gosh, we're getting toward the end, right? And you're working on your papers, hitting at that really good and hard. Ash, yeah, you're all in, right? And part of the paper is your PESTEL analysis, and PESTEL includes an L, which is legal, right? Well, that's what we get to talk about today, or at least part of what we get to talk about today. Hey, Daniela, fantastic. Great to have you with us. Today we're talking generally about legal, ethical, and regulatory climate around international business. Now, I want to be clear. Today I'm talking about it in big 30,000 foot level, big picture, right? You will need to research what are the legal and regulatory ramifications of your particular country for your paper. But in that document that I provided you for the PESTEL analysis, it shows you where to go directly to get the information you need. So you're going to be in great shape there. What I want to do today is really kind of define a lot of these terms. What do we mean by legal, ethical, regulatory, and kind of give you an example of how they influence international business. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and come over here. I'm going to get my highlighter all set, and let's go ahead and move forward. The first thing I want to do is really do a deep dive into ethics. This includes defining ethics and then talking about how ethics play into international business. Now, the thing about the word ethics is this is one of those words that you know what it means. You know ethics. If I say it's ethical or unethical or talk about ethics, you know what the word is. However, it's very rare that I find somebody who can define ethics. It's one of these words that we know it, but we don't know it. It's kind of like the word ironic. You know what ironic means, but if you were asked to define ironic, it might be a little bit difficult. Well, ethics are the same way. And so what I want to do is give us a really good definition and explanation of what ethics are. And to do that, first got to go to the right screen. First, I'm going to give you a dictionary definition. Now, you guys know I'm not a fan of dictionary definitions because it's kind of one of those things of, all right, you've told me, but what do you mean, right? Let's first do the dictionary definition, and then I'm going to show you what I mean, all right? So, ethics are defined as standards of behavior. Think about it. The standards of behavior. So ethics have everything to do about behavior. It's all about behavior. What do we do? How do we act? How do we approach something? It's about behavior. Ethics are standards of behavior, meaning you should follow these standards that tell us how human beings ought to act in the many situations in which they find themselves. Here's the thing. Ethics are dependent upon what role are you inhabiting at that moment, okay? So a situation that I find myself in, well, I am a friend, I am a parent, I'm a citizen, I'm a child of some dude somewhere. I'm a citizen, I'm a business person, I'm a student, I'm a teacher, I'm a professional. Each one of those are distinct roles that I inhabit and that you inhabit as well. Well, the standards of behavior for each one of those roles is different. I am going to exercise different standards of behavior with my students than I would with other business people. Okay? With my students, I try to be really, really understanding. I try to be flexible. I move things around. I give copious explanation. I want you to succeed so badly. Okay? When it comes to another business person that I'm working with, dude, you should know better. If you're not cutting it, you need to move on, because this is a different situation. I am going to tell my students, hey, you know what you're doing, you're on the right track. I like what you're doing. You need to adjust this a little bit. Don't forget to include that in your paper. I think you need to spell this out a little bit more. I think you need to leave this alone. You're done. I'm going to give lots of specific feedback. To my children, I'm going to say, this is the greatest picture I've ever seen, and I'm going to put it on the refrigerator and say, it's so amazing. It was junk, but I'm going to say it's so amazing, because that is a different expectation held of me as a parent than as a, professor. Okay, you get what I'm saying. Well, let me give you some examples, and I'm going to compare them with other things that we probably have some understanding of. And I got to push the right button. Here we go. I apologize. Let's talk about a personal value, a guiding principle. All right. We all have personal values, personal guiding principles. For example, one of my guiding personal principles is I always try to tell the truth. That's something I believe, that, you know what, it just takes too much energy to try to beat around the truth or to lie. I mean, I always try to tell the truth. It makes for a better life. A personal principle. Well, then we have something called a moral. A moral is when a community looks at a guiding principle and says, you know what? I think we would all benefit as a community if we were to adopt this principle. So in the case, and that means codifying this value as something that the community adopts. So, thou shalt not bear false witness. That is where a community, in this case, the Judeo-Christian community, has literally written into stone this idea of telling the truth. Okay? All right, so that's a personal value, and then that's a moral, right? Something that the community says we really all ought to do. Well, then we have laws. Laws are when we as a community say we are going to enforce this behavior and attach consequences to those who fail to, act accordingly. In other words, we're really going to kind of, for lack of a better term, force this behavior. We're going to enforce it. We're going to punish if you don't do it. We're going to do everything we can to make sure you don't do this. And so we have laws regarding libel, slander, perjury. These all go back to, I always try to tell the truth, thou shalt not bear false witness. Well, now we've actually got some teeth attached to it. All right? Then what is an ethic? An ethic is the best thing to do given the circumstance. So as a parent, I might say, yeah, there's a Santa Claus. Now, mind you, and if you don't know, you're going to find out from me, there is no Santa Claus. So I totally lied. I bore false witness because I'm saying I witnessed Santa Claus. I haven't. And I've perjured myself. I've always said I was going to tell the truth. This is my son, my daughter. They have a right to expect me to tell them the truth. And so I say, yes, there's a Santa Claus. Or, yes, that is the greatest picture. That is such a good picture. Oh, I love your essay about the little fairy people in fairyland with the wings, and one has 3 wings and the other has 4 wings, and the one with 3 wings feels bad because they don't have 4 wings. You know, and that's such a good story. No, it's not. It's awful. But as a parent, the right thing to do, given the circumstance, is to encourage my child, help them feel good about themselves, and to be brave, and to take risks, and to try new things, and to learn from the process, right? So that's ethics. And by the way, something can be ethical and illegal. And in the same way, something can be illegal, or can be legal, but unethical. All right. So they don't always agree. And that's what ethics are really about. They're about ethical dilemmas when you are really between a rock and a hard place. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. Ethics are all about finding the best solution among a bunch of really bad solutions. So, for example, what to do this Thanksgiving? You know, a week and a half from now, we're going to have Thanksgiving. You're going to have to make an ethical decision around what is the best thing to do in terms of bringing the family together. You're going to have to do a risk analysis, and you're going to have to look at what is the potential risk and what is available in terms of risk mitigation. You will find no perfect solution. There is no perfect solution. You're going to find the least bad of a lot of bad solutions. Some of you are going to say, we're just not going to get together for Thanksgiving. We're going to have a Zoom meeting. That's a crappy solution. But it's going to keep everyone healthy. You might say, damn the torpedoes. We're getting all together. We're going to have a big family dinner. We'll try to social distance to some point, but you know what? We're all healthy. We're going to be fine. Well, that's a really crappy solution from a health standpoint, but it's a great solution for family unity, right? Ethical dilemmas. Well, international business is full of ethical dilemmas. I like to say that there are no more easy problems to solve. We have been doing business for centuries. We have solved all the easy problems. Good news. Well, the bad news is the only problems left are the hard problems, the difficult problems, the wicked problems, the ones with no good solution. And that's what this is about. Okay, so with that, let's keep going. I want to explore 4 what are called straw man approaches to ethics. Straw man approach basically means, hey, listen, there's something to be said for this approach, but it is not a fully ethical standalone solution. All right. In other words, all right, you should consider these things when you're trying to decide what to do internationally. But anybody who says this is the one and only solution is way off base. And we're going to talk about how they are good, and we're going to talk about how they are bad, and how it's still hard to find a good solution. But you'll want to think about these for your papers. The first one is called the Friedman document, and I'm going to get down here out of the way for a moment. This dude right here is Milton Friedman. Hey, he's a genius, man. I mean, he's a Pulitzer Prize winning economist from the 1980s, professor, the dude is just dripping with genius. But he had a pretty darn myopic view, one-sided view of what constituted ethical in terms of business. The approach here with the Friedman document is the doctrine is that the only social responsibility a company has is to increase profits for its shareholders so long as you obey the law. So long as you obey the law, you can do anything so long as you are maximizing shareholder wealth. Here's a quote from Friedman. There is one and only one social responsibility of business: to use its resources and engage in activities designed to increase its profits so long as it stays within the rules of the game, which is to stay, engages in open and free competition without deception or fraud. So, once again, this is saying you can do anything so long as you are obeying the law, not engaging in fraud, and increasing shareholder wealth. Well, okay. Well, then, by that logic, I can find a country rich in resources that has very low environmental laws and regulations. And I can go to that country and basically rape it of all its natural resources and completely pollute the environment. But because I did not, break any laws over in that country, and I maximize shareholder wealth, I am ethical. No, you're not. One of the ways that the Friedman doctrine breaks down is that it confuses legal with ethical. Just because you're being legal does not mean that you're being ethical. All right? So that's where that argument breaks down. Here's another one. This one is called cultural relativism. And on the surface, it looks great. Ethics are determined by the culture, so companies should adopt the ethics of the culture in which they operate. So when in Rome, do as the Romans. And actually, when it comes to me traveling, I like to adopt the local culture as much as I am able to, as much as I can figure out how. So, for example, I don't drink tea, or at least at the time I did not drink tea. I should ameliorate that statement. At the time that I was in India, I did not drink tea. But I was invited into a man's home with his family and so forth. This was a very poor family, but they rolled out the red carpet for me, and they brought out, food and gifts, and they made tea for me. Well, I knew that A, I didn't drink tea. B, I know the milk came from that goat right over there. I saw you milk the goat. And C, I know that the water here is not good. I should not drink the water. Did I drink the tea? Oh, yeah, you better believe I drank that tea. I drank that tea, and I appreciated it, and I thanked them copiously, because it would have been rude and, in my mind, unethical for me to push away that overture of hospitality. But in business, this doesn't always fly, because you might say be in a country where child labor is perfectly fine. No, just because when in Rome, do as the Romans, doesn't mean that you should adopt the ethics or the culture over there when it comes to things that go against your own ethical code. By the way, child labor here in the United States is perfectly legal. If you own your business and you have children, you can employ your children. Yeah, you can totally employ your children. You pay them. They are full-fledged employees. They can't work for anyone else, and you can't employ anybody else's children. But if you have a business and you have children, you can employ your children. Well, different countries might have different views of that, and in some cases they're like, oh yeah, this is a great form of wealth for the family. No. You cannot practice cultural relativism in all ways. Okay, next one. By the way, well, we'll worry about that. I already gave an example, so we'll move on. The righteous moralist. The righteous moralist says whatever a company's home country standards are, these are the standards that should be followed in all countries. All countries. I have here a picture of INT'L because INT'L has a slogan called "Copy Exact." Copy exactly! Exclamation mark. Copy exactly! Exclamation mark. It's a way that it ensures quality control in all its facilities. But you cannot copy exactly when it comes to morals and ethics, right? You can't say, well, this is how we do things here, so we're going to expand that everywhere else. Now, INT'L tried this domestically. INT'L used to, years and years ago, they said, okay, it's a pain in the butt to figure out the overtime laws for all the states in the union. So we are going to take the overtime laws in California, where they are most generous, and we are going to apply those overtime laws to all our employees in the United States. That is a great example of righteous moralist. Whatever's done in California, we're going to do it everywhere. Well, they did that for like 30 years and then one day said, damn, that's expensive. We don't need to do that. And so they changed it. And there's a whole story there. I won't bore you with it, but it's a fascinating story because I was part of it. So, for example, if a company pays an employee in the U.S. $21 an hour, a decent livable wage, should they pay the employees in India a fortune? Well, now here's where things get tricky here, folks, right? Let's play with this. All right, let's look at fair trade. This website right here is figures out what is the proper wage to pay somebody in a different country if you are trying to match standard of living. Okay, now, just to kind of put it here in terms that we can get first, let's say that here in Utah, you earn $60,000 a year. That's middle class. That's kind of lower middle class, but you can live a life. You can live a life on $60,000 a year here in Utah. It's not going to be a great life, but you'll manage. And if you're good with money, you'll manage really well. Take that same $60,000 and move to Kansas, and you can get a McMansion. You'll be in really nice shape. Take that very same $60,000 and go to the Bay Area in California, and you are at the poverty line. Okay? So it's all relative to where you are geographically, right? That's the case for the United States. Well, it's the case for the globe as well. So now check this out. If I'm paying a worker here in Utah $21 an hour, then I can pay this worker in this region of India 66 cents an hour, and they will be at the same standard of living because the economy is relative. But now here's the thing. The money says that, right? The local economy says that. But what happens when the press gets wind that I am paying people just over $5 a day to make sneakers? they would have a field day with me, right? You're paying these workers $5 a day. And I would say, no, listen, when you look at the cost of living and how economies work and so forth, that is the equivalent of $21 here an hour in the US. That ain't shabby. People aren't going to hear that. They're not going to hear it. So then you go, okay. I'm going to, just for appearance's sake, I'm going to increase this to $50 a day. I'm going to increase it by 10%. So instead of paying them 60 cents an hour, I'm paying them, $6 an hour. That way, when the press looks at me and so on and so forth, they say, oh, yeah, that looks all right. Okay, we can live with that. But now I have artificially affected the local economy, okay? Now other employers can't hire people out there because there's this one employer who pays 10 times more. I've screwed up the mom and pop shops. There's actually whole science around all this. I have really introduced something unnatural to that local economy. It's interesting. It's an ethical dilemma, all right? Okay, so in other words, the righteous moralist doesn't really hold water either. The last one is the naive immoralist. The naive immoralist says, if a practice is common among other companies, then it's not unethical. So if everybody in this region is bribing government officials, then it's okay to bribe government officials because that's just how business is done. Now, many of you who have done business or lived in other countries, maybe you've seen this. I know folks who have done business in Russia, and there's all kinds of hoops you need to jump through in Russia to get things done. And many people are highly tempted to kind of, grease the wheels a little bit with some bribes. And everybody does it. Everybody does it. And because everybody does it, it's really tempting to say it's just the way it is out here. It's not unethical since everyone's doing it. No, it's still unethical. It makes it a lot more difficult to do business there, which is why we include this when we look at country attractiveness. How attractive is it to do business somewhere? One of the things we look at is what kind of economic systems and legal systems do they have in place that allow us to get up and off the ground there, okay? So there's a lot of, I'm not going to be able to give you a slide here. There's no one slide I can give you to say, okay, here's the answer. These are all things that we need to consider so that we can find the least bad solution among a whole bunch of bad solutions. That's what ethics is all about. Okay. But it's uber important. I mean, really important. Because ethics are going to help guide us in our employment practices. I gave you the example there of paying somebody 66 cents an hour in India. That's nuts. Well, in that region of India, that's actually pretty darn good wage. Well, then what about work conditions, right? I can't show this video because we're showing a video, and I can't show a video on a video because then I get sued. But this guy is more or less trapped. He's a foreign worker working in Malaysia. He's an Indian working in Malaysia. And in order to get this job in Malaysia, he had to hand over his passport and basically be forced to work for this company for 4 years because they brought him over. And it's indentured servitude is what it is. It's indentured servitude, which, if you're playing along at home, is bad. Okay? By the way, if you're getting tuition reimbursement or tuition assistance from your employer, is there a clause that says that once you get your degree, you need to stay for, say, 2 years afterwards, or you have to pay back all that money? Is that ethical? Now, personally, I have zero problem with it. I think that's great. That's fine. They've invested in you. They want a return on that investment. And as a result, you have to stay with them or you have to pay back your tuition. I think that's fine from an HR perspective. It is the same principle as what's going on here. Here, the company paid to bring them on over. You have to work for us for 4 years. We're going to take away your passport. We're going to more or less lock you up in the factory. You can't go anywhere else. And if you did want to leave, you'd have to pay us all the money that we invested in you, which they can't pay. Same principle, but in a different way, it becomes egregiously unethical. Well, now, why would it be ethical for you to stick around for a company because they paid you for your tuition versus unethical for this person who came over and had their travel expenses paid? Trust me, one's ethical, one's unethical. What are the differences? What are the extremes? What are they exploiting, right? Exploiting need, exploiting lack of resources, exploiting fear and so forth. Yeah. So you got to think about these things when you're doing business abroad. Human rights. Okay. So Shalise is not with us today. She had a conflict, but this is a screenshot from a video that's no longer out there because CNBC sued YouTube and said take it down, which is a real shame because it's a great video. And it talks about Coca-Cola in South Africa during apartheid. And Coca-Cola was in South Africa and Pepsi was in South Africa. And during the time apartheid, which is basically a government run by the white minority subjugating the black majority, the U.S. had boycotts against South Africa. And Pepsi decided to honor the boycott and they left South Africa. All right. What did Coke do? They did not honor the boycott. They stayed in South Africa and they doubled down. But check this out. They made sure that all their distributors were black-owned companies. And they set up local black Africans in companies to be distributors and sales and so on and so forth. They really helped build a black middle class of business people because they said, we're going to stay here, but we're going to help solve the problem. And so Coca-Cola has a fantastic reputation in South Africa because of what they did there during apartheid. Now, that was a human rights decision. Pepsi didn't do anything wrong by leaving and honoring the boycott, and it could be argued that Coca-Cola exploited this vacuum because everyone left and really established themselves a stronger foothold in South Africa. Was it the right thing to do? I think it was. This report thinks it was. But it doesn't change the fact that they exploited an opportunity brought on by human rights. Now, they helped then solve that issue. But like I say, ethical dilemmas. All right. Obviously, environmental concerns. Everything you own and use and touch came out of the earth. Came out of the earth. You're surrounded by plastic. You're surrounded by plastic. That's all made from oil, right? That's what they're doing here. They're getting oil out of the ground. Everything if you've touched it, it came out of the ground. And that means somebody pulled it out of the ground. And when you pull things out of the ground, you mess up the earth around it. Well, what kind of ethical dilemmas are we going to run into as we try to get the resources we need to run our businesses. Corruption, big time. This is from a report, Walmart Fines and Profits. They had to pay, $282 million in fines to the U.S. government because they were doing shady stuff overseas, because of corruption. So this is an ongoing ethical issue for companies doing business, right? Ultimately, it comes down to what are our moral obligations. Companies have power. Oh, wrong one. Companies have power that, influence so many. I mean, think about it. It would be an interesting exercise to sit down and think at some point, how much does Google, Amazon, Xfinity, and the oil companies influence each moment of our lives? At this very moment, Google, who owns YouTube, is influencing us. And we're using plastic computers, so oil resources, Xfinity providing the internet connection, and so forth. Are there really many moments in a day where these companies are not influencing our lives, let alone our communities? I don't know that there are. And so they have a special moral obligation to really behave ethically because they influence so much. Okay? All right, that's ethics. I wanted to do a deep dive in ethics just because, as I mentioned before, it's one of those things that we understand but don't, right? Well, now you're even more confused than you were before. You're welcome. Let's talk laws. I'm just going to give you some interesting examples. Laws are different. And you're like, yeah, Lon, I know. Laws are different around the world. I get it. Yeah, okay. But they're different around the world for some really interesting reasons. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. You've heard the term common law versus statutory law. Once again, you've heard the term common law, statutory law. Do you know what the differences are? Okay. Well, all the countries here shown in red, here, these are countries that practice a lot of common law. Well, what's common law? Well, let me first tell you what statutory law is. Statutory law is when a bunch of lawyers get together, they write a law, they send it to the legislature, the House passes it, the Senate passes it, and then the executive branch signs it, whether that's a governor, president, or whoever. So a bunch of people got together, wrote the law, signed off on it, it became law. Okay, that's how most of the world does it. Common law is law that isn't written. It's based on precedent. Meaning, if you take something to a court, if you sue or something like that, there are no laws on the book around this sort of thing. The question is, what is the precedent? What has been done in the past? So they will go back and back and back to see who kind of set precedent at the beginning and how have all the courts supported that precedent going forth. Now, here in the United States and Canada and so forth, our precedent for common law goes back to when we were part of England and Canada part of France and so forth. Our common law goes way, way, way back to King George and before. So, yes, we follow laws that are not even written down. They're just based on precedent. That's kind of unique, as you can see. Check out the countries that do this, by the way, right? So you get Australia, well, that's because they were part of England. India and Pakistan, well, they were part of England. US, Canada, well, they were part of England. You see how it works, right? That's global influence of the empire age. Okay, so that's one thing that's unique. Then we have something else. Sharia law. All right, Sharia law. Now, if you've grown up here in the United States, I am willing to bet that you have heard of Sharia law. And I'm also willing to bet that you heard about it in a negative context. Oh, they practice Sharia law. They're, heathens. Or, oh, they want to bring back Sharia law. They want to go back to, hand for an eye for an eye. No. Sharia law is just another legal system that happens to be practiced in many countries in the Middle East. It's not anything, barbaric or anything. It's just another legal system. Okay, I'll give you an example. In Sharia law, you are not allowed to pay interest. Can't pay interest. You cannot take out a loan. Well, you can take out a loan, but you're not allowed to charge interest or pay interest on that loan. It's just illegal. All right? It's Sharia law. And you're like, well, gosh, that seems kind of odd that they would let something like a religious principle dictate a business term. Yeah, well, we have laws on usury, right? On you cannot, charge 800% interest, although the payday loan companies do, right? So we have all kinds of laws based on moral tradition. So they can't pay interest because they figure that's exploitation. Okay, give you another example. You're not allowed to invest in companies that deal with alcohol or gambling. That's against Sharia law. So if you're starting a company that involves alcohol or gambling, you're not going to get investors in the Middle East. Now, none of you are, right? So you're not in trouble and you're not going to be doing business there, but it's something, you need to take into account. The terms and conditions of a joint venture contract should be drafted in such a way as to avoid any possibility of dispute during conducting business or at a time of sharing profits or bearing the loss. Let me put that in English for you. It means if there is a dispute between two partners in a business, or when there's a loss in the business, the contract needs to be written in such a way that there is zero question of what happens. Zero question, no dispute. If there's any kind of loss for the company, or if they break up, or if they disagree on a direction, they can go to article this, line that, prefix that, and say exactly what's going to happen. Sharia law does not like business disputes, and so they built it into the contract. Last one. Business capital should be delivered in the form of money. And you're like, well, what else would it be? Well, let me show you. If a partner is joining a business venture with an existing business, commodities, or property, the value of these assets should be valuated in terms of money. This amount should then be treated as the partner's contribution. Okay, so what do I mean? All right, so Ash, I'm going to go into business with you, right? And let's say, for example, that I have a really awesome camera, a really, really, really incredible camera. I know how to use the camera. It's one of only 8 of these cameras in the world, and you really, 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 really want access to it for your business. Well, here in the United States, we could say, well, the camera is worth $1 million, but the mere fact that this is a unique camera and you need it in particular, the value of that camera can be valued at $4 million because there's the actual camera itself, $1 million, but then there's access to it and the ability to use it and the fact that you're taking it off the market, meaning, you know, it affects supply and so on and so forth. So it's whatever the market will bear. Free competition, whatever the market will bear. Sharia law says, no, 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 no. Anything you bring to a company has to be clearly delineated in terms of money, so that when it comes time, if there are any disputes in the future, we know exactly what we're talking about it because we have quantified it very, very, very clearly. So those are just some examples. Just to kind of show you, different legal systems have different laws that accentuate different aspects of human society. Some of you may be doing business in some socialist or social democratic countries, right? They really put the collective ahead of the individual, central planning of the economy. We've talked about this. Emphasis on equity in economic security, and so on and so forth. So it may be that when you're doing business in these countries, you're going to perhaps pay a lot more in taxes. That's just the law. That's what you can expect. So when you look at the legal systems for your pestle analysis, you'll want to understand, well, what is this going to mean in terms of the country taking some ownership of the company, or in terms of profits and taxes and so on, and what I can include in a contract and cannot include in a contract. You're not going to go deep into this stuff, but you are going to bear it in mind, okay? And that is it. There was a 45-minute quick run into legal and ethical ramifications of international business. As always, I'll stick around a little bit longer if you have any questions, comments, anything like that. Otherwise, you're completely set. We'll talk again on Thursday. Thanksgiving's coming up next week, so we meet Tuesday, but then that's it. But yeah, we're almost done. So I hope you're working on those papers. We have more workshops coming up so we can dig into those more later on. All right. So until we talk again next, have a fantastic week and we'll see you later.